Well, we're so happy to have Dr. Jenny Hwang is a licensed clinical psychologist with over 20 years of experience. Oh my gosh, helping parents of teens navigate connection, conflict, and everything in between. And I think the most important part of the sentence is without fear, shame, or fluff, because fluff is what I think a lot of us live in is what am I doing and how am I doing this? I love that you have a no nonsense approach. You challenge mainstream parenting advice, which is exactly what we all need, and guides parents through the emotional blind spots that often sabotage connection. I mean, there's nothing more that speaks to us, especially as parents who live it every single day, because I think there's so much fear around parenting of teens, and it's so nice to have
Yes. So much fear and so much guilt, and we're just sitting here and we're trying to take in all this information, and all we want to do is do the right thing. And there's a lot of clutter, and there's a lot of things we feel that work for us and don't work for us. And if you can help us get some clarity on this, this will be really helpful.
and there is
I would love to. I'm so
there's one
excited to be
part
here with
that
you
I
guys.
love that
Thank
you
you.
do. It's based on trust and not control. And I think that's probably the biggest kicking off point is trust, not control, because it's often
Yes,
control, not trust.
absolutely. And that's one of the hardest things I think for many parents of teens is that they have gone into the whole parenting endeavor mindfully and 100%. That is what they are all about, is doing this thing. And so parents pouring a lot of efforts into making sure they're emotionally attuned with their kids. And this works when kids are little. But there is a huge shift that happens when they hit adolescence that if parents don't know that parenting changes, what it looks like changes, then they're going to have a hard time shifting with their kids into adolescence. And then it turns out to be a really contentious, bumpy ride where everyone just feels awful. Parents feel like they're doing a horrible job. Teens feel like they can never get it right. And it just makes everyone miserable and so unnecessary, you know?
Yeah, you think about that. Like you think like I'm gonna think off the top of my head of somebody who's in constant battle with their teenagers, but the way how I observe that she's parenting is the same way that she would have parented that teenager when that teenager was 4.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's the hardest thing because the biggest shift from little kid parenting to teen parenting is we move from tending to every pain and distress that they have to try to avoid that, to meet that, to soothe that, to make them happy, to help them feel secure. It shifts though where they need to be able to start making meaning of their own distress.
Yes.
So it is no longer about us making it better for them because what ends up happening is parents turn into what I call a concierge parent, where they're 100% focused on how can I deliver to you the most bespoke experience in education, in extracurricular activity, in friendship, in romantic relationships, whatever, you name it. We have this pressure we put on ourselves when adolescence is exactly the period of time when our kids need to start making meaning for themselves around why certain things are meaningful to them. And
And
also, oh, go ahead.
no, I was just assuming that would meaningful because I think it's also the challenges bring meaning. Like, is that like so?
Yes,
Right. So,
absolutely.
okay. So when they have
Absolutely.
challenges, if we bespoke parent them, then there's no meaning for them.
No, because they think we're just trying to get them to be perfect, which becomes the problem. When kids hit adolescence, their developmental goal shifts now to being one of developing their sense of who they are, that someone that they have to be in order to then be able to launch.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of that being who they are and outlining who they are is they start by outlining who they are not. And parents are the perfect first not me. And so everything that parents and family represent is a natural place that they then turn away from to look at the outside world. And that turn away is not bad news. And that's the problem that a lot of parents have. They take that turning away as disrespect, as a failure in connection. And then this really gets parents agitated because all the parenting books say you have to maintain connection. Except what parents think this means is they need to make their kids happy all the time. This is what keeps parents from being able to set boundaries appropriately because they expect that for a boundary to be set, their child needs to agree with it.
Say that one more time.
That in order, so parents mistakenly believe that for a boundary to be effectively set, the child or teen needs to agree with it.
Can you give an example of that?
Yeah, I need a boundary.
So an example would be, okay, you've been talking to me disrespectfully and being very mouthy and, insulting and condescending when I'm talking to you, especially when we're around your friends. And so let's say your teen says, can you give me a ride? And this has been the history that she's been condescending and there's been this kind of thing, which often happens. A parent could simply say, you know what? I've really been noticing that whenever we're around your friends, I'm not sure what it is that's happening, but your tone changes with me and you start like, I don't know if you're trying to prove something, but it just doesn't feel good to me. So I'm not going to do that for you until you can figure out how to work this thing through. I can't give you a ride. I'm sorry. And so then the teen says, what are you talking about? I only asked you for a ride. I'm getting good grades. I'm doing. And then the parent says, oh, crap, she's right. I can't set this boundary now. As though the lack of agreement from the teen marks that the boundary has, because then what parents will say to me is, well, I tried to set the boundary and it didn't work. Well, what's the sign that it didn't work? Well, the teen yelled at me. The teen yelling at you is not a sign that the boundary didn't work. The teen yelling at you is their response to your boundary. And that becomes something really critical for our kids, especially our kids, this generation, to learn, which is so different when we were growing up. Because when we were growing up, life was all about waiting for crap. We had to wait for next week's episode. We had to wait for the next album drop. Everyone had to practice waiting. Everyone dealt with limits routinely. With the technological advances we've seen and the valorization of everything being limitless, same day delivery, overnight delivery, I can shop tonight, it'll be here in 48 hours. Our kids valorize the lack of limits because society valorizes the lack of limits. So parents are this lonely way station of saying, hey, just because you can doesn't mean you should. That is a very unpopular opinion to hold against the broader cultural backdrop, which makes it really hard for parents of teens. So this is another.
Hard, but important.
Absolutely. So important.
I guess two things on that is number one, because each kid hits this adolescence at each age differently. What age, is it 9? Is it 15? What age are you seeing? What are we looking for if it's not an age, if that makes sense? Because there is an age where kids go baby, adolescence, baby, right? They swing between wanting to cuddle and wanting to give you the finger.
Yes.
Is that when boundaries start?
Yes. So boundaries start in small ways. Like when you ask your little kids, wait, mom's talking. Let me finish, right? We start with those small things. But when they start swinging, so 9 is about the age. I hear parents say, oh my God, my 9-year-old already feels like it. Like I feel like I'm parenting a teenager already. And then I'll talk with some parents who their child is just turning 13 or 14 and it's becoming more of a contentious issue in terms of the differences they're facing. But the key thing that you're looking for is when they're starting to all of a sudden become a little bit more preoccupied with what their friends think, when they're a little less interested in what you have to say, if they seem more preoccupied with interests, and you're like, what happened? They always used to like to hang out with me. You can know that you're probably in the process of watching your child move into this adolescence. And you talk about that pendulum swing, right? That like, cuddle me, F off.
Mhm.
That oscillation pretty much continues
Yeah.
throughout. It just looks different at
Mhm.
each age, what that cuddle me looks like. That cuddle me can be, Mom, can you make me a grilled cheese? You know, that the cuddle me, you have to read that in all different forms. We as parents love the warm, squishy forms of that connection. What we have to remember is what's so exciting about our kids' adolescence. It is the first time in their lives they have a choice. They have a choice about how they want to connect with us. Because everything prior to adolescence, their connection to us, that's fueled 100% by their necessity.
Right.
They need us. And granted, of course, during adolescence, they also need us, but they're starting to now develop this sense of free will and their own ideas. This is, as they become their separate person, this is actually what allows authentic, genuine connection. In order for there to be connection, you need two separate people for there to be connection. So at adolescence, boom, your kid emerges as this growing social being, and you have officially a partner in this parent-child thing in a much more full way that you just didn't have before when your kids were younger. So it's really exciting if you can keep framing it in terms of that and not looking at it only in terms of loss.
Right. Right. Yeah. Hold on. Hold on. Alona,
Yeah.
I just need to one. I just need to. Then when you talk about like all the connection and everything and the boundaries, it is. I think what parents struggle with is we've been told not to say no for so long. Like it's like we've been brought up not to say no. Boundaries and no. Like then how do we when are we putting the boundaries in? Is this like a conversation or like you said it's little bits, but when we're saying boundaries and no, can we just say that's a hard no?
So I think this is one of the biggest adjustments parents need to make. And it actually is reminiscent of, I think, problems that adults have in adult relationships. Boundaries are about what we control for ourselves. It's not about controlling the other person. So my time, my energy, my resources, I can set limits around that. My thoughts and my feelings are mine. My kids' thoughts and feelings are theirs. What often happens is parents set boundaries in the name of trying to control the thoughts and feelings of their children versus genuinely doing it from the position of controlling what is in your control. So there are two kinds of boundaries really that I see play out. One is just the personal boundary, right? I talked to a parent who said, if a man talked to me like this, I would dump him. And I'm dealing with my 14-year-old son. What do I do? Right. So those are kind of personal boundary issues, i.e., I will not tolerate being spoken to in, that tone of voice, that kind of thing. Then there are parental boundaries. Now, these are boundaries parents need to set with in mind this idea that we need to be giving our kids a little bit more responsibility for their life and for their experience of their life. So boundaries can be simply like, wow, okay, you're getting bigger. You're wanting more time on your phone. You've been unhappy with these other rules. This really tells me we're at a point where it's time for us to shift how we do things. And like you're moving up into the big leagues now. Now we're talking about you being a teenager. You're going to be wanting to talk about the freedoms you want. With freedoms come responsibilities. So we're going to set things up a new way to reflect the growing person that you're being, that you're not a little kid anymore. And then you start to set out, okay, so, you buy Robux all the time and you buy, whatever the different currencies are online. Yeah. And all of that. Well, now you're going to have to start earning them. because these things, parents, we work to have the money so that you can have these things, and you're getting to the age where it's time for you to learn how these two things go together.
I hope I know the answer to this, but just so that it's like really basic, if a parent has created a parental boundary, and maybe them and their partner or whoever they're parenting with has decided this is going to be a hard boundary for us, and we're going to say to our kid, that is a hard no. Are we, even though, I mean, even the kid could probably like hypothesize why it's a no, is it important to sit down and explain to them and let them like have any feedback before that becomes like a firm boundary? Or is it, here's the boundary, it's a firm no, this is why, I don't really care about your input?
Well, so there are some boundaries such around things like drug and alcohol use, let's say, right? Where I will encourage parents, if they have not started introducing this already, and if this is much easier to do, to start when your kids are younger, but to introduce this idea that there will be random drug testing sometimes, just to make sure everyone's okay. Now, some parents are like, oh, I got real issues with this, and I respect that. So, but this is for parents who are super concerned about, well, is my kid vaping? And vaping really becomes introduces this issue where it becomes harder to detect.
Jenny, I've never even heard about random drug testing.
Oh my God. Yeah, no, I know. It sounds hardcore.
Well, I know, I'm sure that people do it. I haven't met anyone, or maybe they just haven't told me.
Well, people don't like to talk about these things. And this is part of the problem with parenting teens and the lack of support around parenting teens. Something happens where we're all eager to talk about how we're ready to lose our minds because our 3-year-old won't stop crying, or, but when it's time to talk about our 13 or 14-year-old, it starts getting much more private.
Yeah.
Because people start making a lot of interpretations quickly then about, well, what does it mean about your child and who he's going to be or they're going to be when they become an adult in a few years? And what does this say about you as a parent? And so parents just get more and more isolated in this. So things like drug and alcohol use. Look, chronic THC vaping is a huge problem, at least here in the States. For many of us, it is. And so there are some parents for whom it has been the thing that has made that drug testing policy has been the thing that makes the difference. And this is in some families where they have a known history of addiction in the family. So because of this understanding, they're like, they make that part of the education with the child, where they say, look, this isn't about trust or not trust. This is about realistically what happens and what we know the difference is between all the things we intend and sometimes the way that we can make decisions that go against what we said we were intending. Like fluky things happen because our kids have this way of thinking, well, I know what the right thing is and I would never make that mistake. And I think it's important for every parent to have that conversation with their teen, saying, look, you're going to find a time when you're in some place where you're in trouble. And you swore you'd never end up in this place, and you can't even imagine how it got there that quickly and that badly. I promise you, you'll find that place. When you do, please don't be alone in it. Reach out to me, because that is part of what happens in life, that you get caught off guard, that you think you know your own limits, and you end up in situations where you're like, crap, how did this happen? And that becomes part of how you learn. And this is the big piece for adolescents is we're stepping back to start giving them room to make choices and to prioritize things in their life and to show up so they can start seeing what are the consequences that come from that, learn from that, move forward, make adjustments. What happens with concierge parenting is parents try to preempt the potential mistake.
Yeah.
So then it becomes a battle between the teen and the parent. Why do you keep nagging me to do this? Mom's like, well, this is really important for you to do because, if you don't do this, the school might think. there are all these kinds of rationale that the parent has in mind, but the teen doesn't understand this because the teen isn't getting this data from the school. If it's coming from mom, teen is thinking this is just this random thing that mom's making a big deal out of because she's so uptight.
Yeah.
So then it turns into this battle. Then the parent's like, why am I screaming at my kid about, I just want him to do better. I'm just trying. And so the mom's like, I'm just trying to help you. And the teen screaming, you don't understand me. You never believe in me. You don't trust me. And mom is like, where are you getting that I don't trust you? Well, I'll tell you where. In the parent's inability to stomach giving the teen room to potentially mess it up.
Yeah.
Question for you in terms of like the boundaries and you saying that I feel like we're in a new generation where kids are taking way less pushback to their parents and they're not taking risks and they're not looking for as much independence. I find that the teenagers are much more complacent in their, like they're really stressed about maybe university, but they're not
hungry in the way that I think Gen Xers and Zennials were when because I know when I was a teenager, I couldn't wait to get the hell away from home, right? Like that and that was most of our generation. That is not this generation. This generation, we have done a very good job creating a great nest for these guys, and they love the nest.
Yes.
This is where parental boundaries come into play, where they have to understand, all these beautiful, lovely things that you have been able to enjoy. We have worked for these things. Like this is because we made priorities and we made choices and we sacrificed these things so that we could all have these things. Now the next few years, it's going to suck in a lot of ways because it's all going to be about you learning how to deal with people saying no, people, limits here, limits there, time pressure here, and figuring out how to still get what you want and need through it all.
Do they want anything? Like, do they? I feel like their world is to get good grades. Like, it's really interesting because I hear the parental boundaries because it's almost like they want to be around the parents so much and parents are around more than ever because like post-COVID and work from home, there really isn't a lot of room for them to go explore or kind of do these things. I'm wondering, like, it is parental boundaries, but oh gosh, it's like the boundaries are, I guess, letting them actually not being a concierge to them. Like no longer are we fighting over going out till midnight. It's like, it's, what? I'm having friends over, go do something downstairs, like something like that where we're not incorporating them and everything.
One thing I encourage parents to do when their kids are moving into their teenage years is to think about one thing that an activity, hobby, interest that you gave up when you became a parent. And to start finding your way back to that interest, just in even a small way, an hour a week, because you would be amazed at how much that psychological room that you make for yourself actually gives your teen the distance that they need that feels healthy for them.
So if they're not going to do it, we're going to do it, basically. Yes, if they're not going to leave, we're going to leave, is what you're saying.
Like then all that room that we would be using on the hobby, we're just giving them more than they need. That makes a lot of sense. That's such good advice, just like also like to parents for themselves and for their well-being, but also to be a better parent and to make kids have more space from that.
I am always reminded of this story. There's this small aquarium in Long Island, New York, where I live. And I took my daughter there once when she was 6 and we went. I couldn't go back after this time because there's this big like aquarium shark. There are sharks and tropical fish all swimming around. And my daughter asked one of the volunteers, how come the sharks don't eat the fish? Which I had never considered. And the docent said, well, what we do is we do this thing called controlled feeding. And so we make sure the sharks are always fed so that they are never hungry, so that they never have the drive to go hunt the fish.
Yeah.
This is what parents have done to teens.
Oh, it's so true.
They need to be hungry. They need to feel the limit because we are creatures of contrast. We only know good in contrast to bad. We only know like warm and squishy in contrast to feeling alone and out on your own. So that's the challenge. Parents have this tremendous guilt about not giving everything and going above and beyond. I really think that's a remnant of our own trauma from our own generational
Mm.
experience of the baby boomer parenting.
I was going
And
to ask you that, Jenny. I'm like, how did we get here? Like, because I'm thinking about the way that I grew up and all the things that I had to go to do to feel uncomfortable because listen, I had enough food in my cupboards, but I wasn't always being fed the fish. So I had to go off and I had to do things to get my fish. And I feel like that was just so natural. That's what all of us were like. But now we're only one generation below. Like I'm only like 23 years difference in age than my mom, but I feel like that we're parenting so different, so much more
well,
concierge-ish.
oh, so here's the difference. When we were kids, we were used to being on the outside, right? Wherever mom and dad went, that's where we went. That's what we're doing. Doesn't matter what we're interested in doing.
Mm-hmm,
Just keep yourself occupied. Be good. Be quiet.
mm-hmm,
Don't make yourself a nuisance.
mm-hmm.
Our generation grew up, and what did we do with our children? Now we're adults. We can become the center of our own life. What did we
Yeah.
do? We had kids and we moved them to the center of our life.
Yes. Why?
Because as a reaction to the way we were not the center of our parents' lives.
But I mean, it's not like it was bad. I feel like I didn't feel
Well,
bad.
hello. Right. This is what happens though is kids hit their teen years. What do our teens do? They push us out. And when that happens, that is like the straw to break the camel's back for most parents today, because they're like, we have done everything and this will not stand, it's just so funny because it again speaks to the kind of self-healing that a lot of parents need to do to be able to meet their teens kind of where they need them to be.
Oh, it's like therapy. I've always wondered how we ended up here.
I think that one of the biggest take homes is we need to put in our boundaries to parent better rather than changing them. We need to change us first and then
Absolutely.
let them go and be teenagers, but we need to start parenting like we want them to launch rather than parenting them to stay home forever. That's what it feels like we're all doing.
I also love that sentence that you said, the way that you said it. I mean, maybe you've said it before. When you said it sounded so nice. It was when you said like you're going to end up somewhere. You're not going to know how you got there, and it's going to be like all that, but just in that time, like don't be there alone. I feel like that could be like a post, like a thing in your house, a poster in your house, or like a way, something to say to your kids, but also to remind them because you're going to be there.
Yes.
Just you don't feel you need to be there alone.
Absolutely. One thing that's so important that happens as parents for our teenagers is we're not just teaching them anymore. We're increasingly more of a model than anything else. We represent a horizon of what is possible, what they can become, who they can become, which is why it's really important that we're careful about how we teach them to treat us, because it's an issue of self-respect as well. And there is a point at which they need to learn, look, I hope you don't ever tolerate someone talking to you this way just because you love them a lot. And so these lessons, there are just so many lessons that can spin off of just about everything that happens with a teenager every day. I think if you can just stay open to the messiness and not take the mess and the points of disconnection and conflict as signs that you're a failure or that everything's crashing down, you'll be in much better shape.
Where can people find out more of your words and everything you're saying? It just makes so much sense and it's so easy to understand. Where can we get more from you?
So if you go to Instagram, you can follow me at Project Parent Coach. That's my primary social media place. And also you can go to my website, projectparentcoach.com. I offer free consultations to parents. Specifically, I have a couple of programs to help parents get through this transition if they're sort of in that tween area and they're like, wow, we really need guidance making this shift. I can really help parents with that. So if people are interested in that, just go to my website and set up a free discovery call. I'd be happy to talk with you guys.
And virtually all over the world, anywhere.
Yes. Yes. I work with people all over the world.
Where's your book, Jenny?
Oh, well, I will tell you, it is actually forthcoming. And so I have a book deal with Penguin Life. And so hopefully in the next year, you will see it on the bookshelves.
Yeah.
Sounds
like
Talking
we need it more
exactly
than ever
about
right
this.
now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for everything.
Thank you. Yes. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.